Now this figure 18-62 deals where you're going to have one disconnect and one controller operating a number of motors. Uh, Believe it or not, just maybe a week or two ago, I got this question. And the question, was, hey, we got these fractional horsepower type motors, and they're kind of vent fans, and they're all within sight in this facility of the disconnect and the controller. And we want to know, can we just use one disconnect and one controller? We've been told we can't. Well, if you really looked at 430.87 for the controller there on page 324, no, you couldn't. If you looked at 430.112 there on page 327 of the code, no, you couldn't. But if you review the exception to 430.112, yes, you could use one disconnect. And if you looked at the exception 1 to 430.87 there on page 324, yes, you could use one controller. Now, many times, they want these motors to be within sight of your controller, but according to this to the question the guy asked, this was the case. So these fractional horsepower motors that they had were 480 volt, and they were kind of large fractional horsepower motors, right below the 1 horsepower, and each one of these individual motors had overload protection. So by applying the exception 1 to 430.87, page 324, the exception, say, to 430.112 on page 327, yes, this installation could take place. But now remember the inside and within sight rule that you would have on page 37 in Article 100 for the disconnect. And then remember 430.109 for sizing horsepower, 430.110A to make sure the disconnect could break the controller, stop it, in other words, the motors, and de-energize everything safely. And then the controller would be equivalent to all the horsepower by 430.83A1 that we reviewed. And then, of course, the location of the disconnect in relationship to the motors, remember that's in 430.102. So with all this information and looking up these sections and what they say, yes, figure 18-62 very definitely illustrates that you could have one disconnect and one controller for a number of fractional horsepower motors, in this case, according to the question that the individual asked. So that's what this figure 18-62 is illustrating.